Dear colleagues, I think all of us have come, and we suggest that we start our session so that the next panel after our presentation today will not be delayed. First of all, I would like to thank all of you who have come here to listen to this presentation and to participate in the presentation. We have selected the venue of the forum together with the Council of Europe for the official launching of our joint program. The forum brings together specialists of different fields in jurisprudence and different professors. There are practicing lawyers who are dealing with pro bono. There are teachers and professors, outstanding professors, and a lot of public lawyers, those who work in lawyers firms, officials with legal education. So all the categories of the people are represented here who are to a certain extent involved in issues related to rendering pro bono legal assistance in different forms. The purpose of our joint program with the Council of Europe is to improve the availability of legal aid primarily to socially vulnerable citizens. We mean those who are disadvantaged, disabled, children who are not supported by their parents. The idea to develop a certain standard on protection of their rights from the viewpoint of their participation in civil cases was proclaimed. You know that in Russia there is law 324 that determines the possibility for the subjects of the Federation to organize the system of rendering pro bono legal aid. And we know that despite the fact that for several years during which the system was deployed, there are some difficulties related to its implementation. That's why we hope that this joint program with the Council of Europe that makes it possible to analyze the experience of other countries which, similar to Russia, have approached the idea of rendering free legal aid on civil cases, and will be able to determine these quality standards first, and secondly to determine specific types of free legal aid that are primarily necessary for vulnerable groups and for disadvantaged groups of citizens, because the potential range of those services is quite extensive, but probably some of the services are not as vital. Obviously, there is a whole set of legal services without rendering which the individual will be physically incapable of protecting his or her interests and probably will risk to become a victim of a certain fraudulent action on behalf of another party. And finally, the third task, as it seems to us, is to prepare the approach and to develop on the basis of pilot projects certain elements that would become the basis of such type regulatory legal acts that would be used by the subject of a federation to establish regulation at the relevant level. These three objectives for the Russian Federation under the program is not all. Actually, the most important and long-term purpose is to try jointly with the Council of Europe to develop a certain standard of rendering pro bono legal aid for socially vulnerable groups of citizens across the whole Council of Europe, all the countries. It is not a secret that in all the countries of the Council of Europe, pro bono legal aid on civil cases is a mandatory standard. Today, such standard exists in the minority of countries. We determine the standard were guided by the experience of Finland, but I know that Finland is still developing that standard within the country, and many countries have not yet approached it. Probably it will take a lot of years, but with time I would like to see the development of the common European standard that could be established as recommendations of the Ministerial Committee of the Council of Europe that would determine unified quality standards for the entire Europe. Thus, launching this program today and officially opening this program with the Council of Europe, we hope that other countries of the Council of Europe will also want to join in a certain way to implementation of that program, probably to its implementation in the Russian Federation or its implementation at the national level, at the level of the countries which also share these tasks and think that providing pro bono legal aid on civil cases for vulnerable citizens, for socially vulnerable groups, is in fact the work that would ensure human rights. I would also like, if you allow, to say a couple of words concerning the cooperation, our cooperation with the Council of Europe. All of you know that our relations with the European Union at present leave much to be desired. We have a certain period of turbulence, and many projects, including quite important projects for both parties, have been frozen. But that cannot be said about the Council of Europe. It might seem a paradox, but our contacts with the Council of Europe have become more intense and more fruitful and more active, even as compared to the period which we regard as a relatively calm period of our relations with the European countries. I will just list several formats under which we interact. Primarily, this is the new educational program HELP, which will render cooperation to the lawyers to educate in human rights. That is our joint program with the Council of Europe, involving other countries as well. We focus on the international legal cooperation on criminal cases under the program. Then we participate with maximum activity in the Commission on the Efficiency of the Justice, the well-known CPESH format, in the European Committee on Legal Cooperation, in the Committee on Interstate Cooperation on Criminal Proceeding, PSMC. I'm not speaking about the European Committee on Preventing Torture, which comes to us each year, and in addition to the official visits, we have constant contacts with that committee at different venues, at different events. Besides, we also have contacts at the level of the management of the Council of Europe. We have regular meetings with the General Secretary of the Council of Europe, Mr. Yablenko, with the Minister of Justice. We also have communications with Commission on Human Rights, with the managers of the relevant directorates, and one of these directors also takes part today in our presentation. To conclude, I would like also to thank the government of the Great Duchy of Luxembourg, which agreed voluntarily to make a contribution to implementation of this joint program with the Council of Europe, and we hope that not only this voluntary contribution, but the outcome of the program will be of interest for Luxembourg. Now I would like, having said it, to give the floor to the extraordinary and plenipotentiary ambassador of the Great Duchy of Luxembourg in the Russian Federation, Mr. Fering.
Mr. Minister, I'm very pleased to be here today morning. It's my first time at the Legal Forum, and I would not have imagined to be the very first time to be here for the opening of a project which is close to our heart, a project that we have now done in cooperation with the Council of Europe and the Russian Federation. Maybe when we speak about this project, I may go into the past and tell about my own personal experiences about free legal aid. It was more than 30 years ago. I was a young guy at the University of Strasbourg. Strasbourg is a city very close to me, not only because of the Council of Europe, it was the city where I passed my university years. And even to the best of all students, and I was never the best, it can happen that you get into trouble with your flat owner. At that time, I was lucky enough to enjoy a legal service, legal counsel at the Strasbourg Tribunal. at the court system of Strasbourg, and that was an experience, my very first experience, more than 30 years ago, with free legal aid in civil matters. So when I was approached by my friend to the right, Mr. Peter Sich, the director of the Council of Europe office in Moscow, I was more than willing and happily willing to try to help to get financing for this project that is basically done in cooperation with my colleague to the left, Mr. Minister Travnikov, because we do consider that obviously access to legal services, if there's no access, there's no justice, there's no rule of law. And there are many people like me before a student, but even there are people who need it much more than students, children, disabled persons, and so I can only congratulate the Russian Federation for the law that was taken in 2011 and set into application in 2012 for trying to set up such a system also in cooperation with the Council of Europe here in the territory of the Russian Federation. It also, when we speak about, I'm a diplomat, when diplomats do speak, we have also political thoughts in mind when we do something. Apart from a very good project, we think that we need to cooperate within the Council of Europe with Russia. We very much value Russia, the cooperation with Russia within the Council of Europe. And that is also important to us in the times we are in right now. Luxembourg will be is the incoming presidency of the European Union from the 1st of July on. And here again, I would like to stress also that in the mindset of Luxembourg, Europe is more than the European Union, and this is now said by an incoming presidency of the European Union. The Council of Europe stands for a larger view of Europe, geographically, but also from the perspective of human rights. And so all in all, we consider this project to be important, technically, legally, but it also does reflect a willingness of Luxembourg to cooperate in Strasbourg with the Secretariat of the Council of Europe, as well as with the Russian colleagues for the promotion of rule of law and human rights in Russia. And what could it be better done than to go again and to try to do this by improving access to legal services, and this in cooperation with the Russian Ministry of Justice. We are inclusive, we are cooperative, and that is our mindset, that smaller countries like Luxembourg, we do apply. Rule of law is important for a country like Luxembourg. Domestic rule of law as well as international rule of law, because we have no big armies. Our army is a small, very small army. We are truly dependent of rule of law, and so we do everything in the international community to try to promote the rule of law. That, I think, is giving you the mindset of a Luxembourg ambassador to Moscow. I came here especially today morning for seeing my friends of the Council of Europe, as well as my friend, the minister to my left, and not last but not least, all of you here in the audience who gave us the pleasure here today morning to be here, to celebrate with us together the opening of this project here now. And I hope that we can foster enough finance also to put this project to a successful end. We are duly committed to it, and I already discussed with Mr. Minister before how we can go on from here. And so I think I do not want to speak too long today. So I thank you for being here, for being supportive to this project. And I would then leave the floor again to my colleagues from Strasbourg, which is always again for me a city that reminds me my youth, a very good time at university. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your kind words about Strasbourg and the Council of Europe. Mr. Deputy Minister, Mr. Travnikov, Your Excellency, Ambassador Fering, I would like to say that it is an honor and a real pleasure for me to be here today to launch this project, the cooperation project between the Russian Federation, the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg and the Council of Europe on free legal aid and assistance to vulnerable groups in the Russian Federation. I would first like to thank, above all, the Ministry of Justice for organizing and hosting this event as part of the 5th St. Petersburg International Legal Forum. Integrating this event into the agenda of the forum is an essential reminder to us all that the notion of access to justice for all is a critical current process of justice sector reform in the face of today's social and economic challenges. And the Council of Europe is grateful to the Ministry of Justice for their role in initiating this project on legal aid. Inviting the Council of Europe as a partner, Mr. Deputy Minister, in this enterprise is a recognition that legal aid is relevant to the protection and promotion of human rights, for which the Council of Europe plays an essential role. We are also extremely grateful to the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg for their trust to the Council of Europe and for their contribution, without which this project would not have been possible. As Deputy Minister Travnikov has indicated, this project is about facilitating and making more effective the implementation of the federal law of 11 November 2011 on free legal aid in civil matters. Free legal aid is essential to the notion of justice and fair trial. Article 6 of the European Convention of Human Rights, that guarantees the right to a fair trial, refers specifically to the need for legal aid in the case of criminal charge and in criminal proceedings. But the case law of the court, a consistent and rather old case law of the court, shows clearly that in certain circumstances the lack of appropriate legal aid scheme can lead to finding a violation of fair trial in civil and in administrative proceedings. So very importantly, the federal law goes some considerable way in giving effect to this case law of the court and to the Council of Europe recommendation, the Committee of Ministers recommendation from '93, on effective access to justice and the law for the poor, which encourages member states to promote legal advice services for the very poor, to set up advice centers in underprivileged areas, and extend legal aid to all judicial instances, civil, criminal, commercial, administrative, and to all proceedings, be they contentious or non-contentious. The federal law is perhaps more limited than the scope, the personal and material scope of this recommendation, but nonetheless, the areas of law covered by the law and the numbers of people potentially concerned are significant, in particular in these times of financial austerity. So legal aid is critical in protecting the right to a fair trial. It creates equality of arms. It creates empowerment. It gives ordinary people access to specialized information on the law and on how they can best defend their interest. It helps ensure that no economic obstacle alone can prevent fair justice for the disadvantaged. The objective of the project is to improve the participation of lawyers in the legal aid scheme at the regional level and to remove the obstacles that hamper take-up by the target groups that are women and men of low income, senior citizens, people with disabilities or mental illness, persons without legal capacity and their guardians, orphaned children, their guardians, children in institutional care. How will we work? Both national and international experts will work together on this project. They will share their experiences, good practices, and the goal is that publicly funded legal services and other forms of free legal advice and assistance, and that is the link that we are doing with the pro bono legal services, that session that will follow. So publicly funded legal services and other forms of free legal advice are targeted more effectively. I'm convinced, Mr. Deputy Minister, that already by the end of the project we will have improvements in the implementation of the federal law and we will be able to see more clearly the framework for the effective extension of the scheme throughout the Russian Federation. And again, thank you very much for the trust to the Council of Europe.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, добрый день.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, I would like to greet all of the participants, greet everybody in the audience on the behalf of the Council of Europe Program Office. Well, one of the objectives of our office is to provide support to all of the subjects in the Russian Federation. So as far as this project is concerned, first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude, especially to the Ministry of Justice and personally to Mr. Travnikov, first of all, because he contacted the Council of Europe with this initiative, and also that during the last 2 years while we were preparing to embark on this project, he hasn't lost his patience and he's continuing to cooperate and work together with us. I would also like to thank His Excellency the Ambassador of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg for providing financial support to this project. I would like to remind you that Luxembourg made this decision not yesterday, but during the summer last year at the heat of the Ukrainian crisis, and we have to remember that the Council of Europe also depends on voluntary contributions of its member states. So Luxembourg became the only country which decided to provide support to this cooperation project with the Russian Federation. I would also like to thank our colleagues from the Council of Europe, Christos, the Director of Human Rights, Director General. As you know, all of our colleagues from the Council of Europe have cooperation projects in all of the member states, so I am extremely grateful that Christos and all of his colleagues find time to dedicate their efforts to cooperate with the Russian Federation. So let me just tell you briefly about what it is that we do in Russia. Apart from this project, last April, we presented a project with the Supreme Court and the Justice Academy of the Russian Federation. That was a project on providing education in the area of human rights law for the representatives of the legal professions. So currently one of the largest projects is with the Mr. Titov, the ombudsman for the human rights in the Russian Federation. So this is an anti-corruption project. We also have a project with the Public Supervisory Committee. And basically we're providing supervision over the penitentiary system in the Russian Federation. Apart from these projects, we also signed a project to cooperate in the area of youth policy, with the social charter, and so on and so forth. So I would like to thank all of our partners one more time. I would like to thank the Ministry of Justice of the Russian Federation, because all of our projects are being held under the aegis of the ministry. I do not know whether the representatives from the ministry are present in the audience today, but I would still like to express my sincere gratitude to them. And I would like to say that next year we will celebrate the 20th anniversary of Russia in the Council of Europe. And I would like to say, when it comes to our cooperation in the area of justice, Russia has signed more than 50 conventions with the Council of Europe. So what we can see currently is that Russia and the Council of Europe created a united legal area from the Pacific Ocean to Vladivostok. So basically the Council of Europe unites the entire continent under the single legal field. So I would like to thank everybody who's present in this audience today for your support and for your assistance. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Petr. Thank you very much, Christos. And thank you for your kind words that you said about me. You said that I had to be patient. over the last 2 years in order to launch this program, but let me tell you, it wasn't really hard for me. It wasn't a torture. I have to say the same as His Excellency. I do feel very sympathetic to Luxembourg. I worked there for 4 years, and I was prepared to wait even longer in order to implement such a wonderful joint project, so that I could find myself today surrounded by good friends who are united by a common goal. So another friend of mine is Mr. Francesco Crisafuri. He is the office chief of the he's the chair of the European Committee on Legal Cooperation. Over to you.
Mr. Deputy Minister and Mr. Ambassador, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I would like first of all to join Mr. Christos Giacoumopoulos in his thanks and congratulations to the Ministry of Justice of the Russian Federation and to Mr. Trasnikov in particular, whom I have the pleasure to have known for quite a long time, which is a pleasure to see him again here, and for this important project on legal aid and for involving the Council of Europe and its steering committee on legal cooperation in this event. Access to justice, it is quite clear to all of us, is in a democratic society governed by the rule of law, is a fundamental right. And it is a fundamental right, first of all, by virtue of logic. And by virtue of that same logic, it has been enshrined in most constitutions and in top-level international legal instruments. For instance, Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights states, in so many words, that in the determination of his civil rights and obligation, everyone is entitled to a fair and public hearing by a tribunal, which means that quite explicitly the Convention states that access to justice is in itself a fundamental right, and as such, it must be effectively granted to everybody. And the European Court of Human Rights, this has also been said by Christos, has repeatedly found, ever since the historical judgment in the case of Erie versus Ireland and in many other judgments, that cultural, financial, and more generally personal conditions of an individual may well raise serious obstacles to that individual's path to justice. And such obstacles must and can be removed. Legal aid is, of course, the primary, I would not go as far as saying the only, instrument to achieve that aim. Another instrument might be pro bono services, which are the subject of the forthcoming panel, forthcoming discussion. I would just like to add, from my own personal and professional experience as a judge in Italy, entrusted inter alia with determining finally the fees of the lawyers who lend their services for legal aid. That legal aid is, of course, a matter of law, of principles, of culture, but it is also, and perhaps primarily, a matter of budget. Because as long as legal aid is provided by professional lawyers, fees must be adequate, must be timely paid, they must represent, they must be adequate to the dignity of the profession, to the value and the complexity of the cases. This is not always the case in all countries for several reasons. So I think that budget and the allowance of adequate funds is a precondition, because I think that nobody wants legal aid to be granted by lawyers who defend the poor because they are not good enough to defend the rich. Legal aid, as I said, is a fundamental right, and I need not dwell any longer on this subject to explain the great interest that the Russian initiative has for the Council of Europe, whose primary concern is the protection and promotion of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, and especially for the Steering Committee on Legal Cooperation, the CDCJ. The CDCJ, which I have the honor to chair for this year, is a committee of governmental experts bringing together in a high-level forum of discussion and decision-making the ministries of justice of the 47 member states. It deals with virtually all legal matters except criminal matters, which are entrusted to another committee. Currently, the CDCJ is in the process of reviewing the European Agreement on the transmission of applications for legal aid and its additional protocol. And the CDCJ is also considering a future activity in this field for 2016 and 2017. And this shows how lucky the coincidence is with the initiative of the Russian Federation and the ongoing and forthcoming project of the CDCJ. They fit perfectly well together, and this coincidence is very welcome because it can facilitate any cooperation or expertise that the Russian authorities might want to seek from the CDCJ, and that the committee itself would of course be very happy to offer. Thank you for your attention.
Спасибо большое, господин Крисофулли.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christofouli. I do hope that following our brief introductory speeches, you already have an understanding of what this program entails, but for those of you who are interested in learning more details, we will publish the information on the website of the Russian Ministry of Justice. I do believe that this information will be accessible also on the website of the Council of Europe. This program envisages a lot of activities, also the projects that we are going to implement in our pilot regions. And I do hope that some of you will find an opportunity to participate in this event. So I would like to invite all of you in participation. Thank you very much for taking part in today's event.